Right, so whereas security is seen as a very complicated discipline that you need a CISSP on various
Yeah.
to get anywhere in it. You can just open up a browser, go and talk to like ChatGPT and start playing with it,
Mm.
which yes is very advantageous, but also it hides the complexity and the problems that might come from that. Right?
Mm. Yeah.
It's like having a very capable toy that can explode on you at any minute.
Exactly.
you,
You
you,
don't
you
know what
you
it
don't
can and
know.
cannot do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's sort of like you've got to educate people that this exciting, cuddly new technology does have downsides.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode, What the Tech podcast with Vivian and Renee. Today, we're really excited to cover a new topic within the AI space. And we've got a fantastic guest with us today. So, Renee, who's our guest today?
Yeah, so before we get to start with the guest today, I think it's worth mentioning that what the tech has been growing over the past few months, even more than what we expected. In the previous episode, we mentioned that we have some fantastic news, and today we are excited to announce that we're going to be at Sydney Build. Sydney Build is just the once a year conference happening in targeting more the construction space, but with AI going crazy around the world, construction is slowly catching up into it. So we're going to have an opportunity to be part of that amazing journey. Also, so the conference is happening on the 7th and the 8th of May at the ICC Center. We've started posting out a few comms on LinkedIn if you follow us on LinkedIn. But over the next few weeks, there's going to be a lot more content to actually indicate how you can attend that specific event, and then also come and see us in person. The good thing is we got a whole bunch of different things prepared for entertainment, as well as some of the merch. So
Some giveaways.
we've got some some really good feedback that we receive from the community about our merch. So that means on the day, come around, say hi, answer a few questions AI related. We're gonna make a quiz out of it, and then win one or two T-shirts. Yeah, so that's what it's been happening behind the scene. Other than that, we've got a whole list of of guests coming up. Today we've got a fantastic one, who happened to be also someone that I know from a professional standpoint. And he's a security architect who has been across multiple industries and worked across different regions. I think originally from the UK, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
He's now based in Australia. So welcome to Keith Marlow. One roll.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. Yeah. So my background is I've been involved in computing since it was a thing. The first computer I had was a ZX81, so that shows you how long I've been in this.
Wow.
And then it evolved from that into doing computing at university, got a degree, then a PhD, then got into working in Yahoo in the early days, and I was there for 16 years and got involved in doing software architecture, coding, security. So I became what was called a security paranoid. Basically, one of the people who thinks about security 24/7 and makes sure that everything is safe. And then got the opportunity to move down to Sydney with my family and became the chief architect in the Asia region, also covering off security at the same time, which is actually quite a nice trick if you can do it, because having the security whip, as it were, can help you solve the architecture side, and they can work off each other. So it gives
Yeah.
me a good ability to look at things in multiple positions at once and come up with secure, long-lived solutions. Right. So I'm now working like in Helia and doing a pretty similar thing, but obviously we've now got the interesting space of AI coming into the mix, which is adding an additional several dimensions of
Complexity.
concern, shall
Yeah.
we say?
Fantastic. We're really excited to have you today on the
Yeah.
podcast, Keith. So jumping straight into it, obviously you mentioned that you were exposed to technology right from the beginning of the internet.
Yeah.
So considering that and your experience in the industry, how would you define artificial intelligence for our audience?
Well, it's a big definition, but artificial intelligence, I think, is technology-based self-agency. So it's about having a system that is able to respond to its inputs, make its own decisions, enact with the environment, and itegrate through that process. Right. So early AI was very much about a classification and is this a car? Is this a dog? Is it something in this set, etc. We've now evolved into a situation where AI is a much more interactive process and a technique in which you can actually talk to these AI models and get them to perform actions for you and give you results, and you can have an interactive conversation with them. So we've gone from a very much static, it'll always work out that's a dog or not, to something now where you're interacting with it and you're actually changing the behavior of the AI with respect to you as you interact with it, right? And then ultimately there's a whole AGI thing where you can have human equivalent self-acting intelligence, which is, I think, quite a way off, but we're seeing aspects of it coming through now in that you're getting the whole agency approach of having separate agents that you can plug in now, which is sort of, to me, is equivalent to say how human beings have different expertise in different sort of areas and they're able to then work together with different people to produce outcomes. You're now seeing that come through with the whole agent space and things like what Google are doing, etc.
Yeah.
So that's a nice evolution, and I think that's a natural evolution, because we're at the sort of situation where computers used to be, shall we say, like very mainframe focused, and then it was desktops and it was laptops. We're now in a situation where computing in AI is very much cloud centric, and you've got clients that you run locally. And yes, if you want to throw a couple of grand at it, you can run a model locally, but it's nowhere near the size that you can deploy from the cloud.
Yeah.
And what I think is we're going to see a progressive change coming through, like what you saw with DeepSeek, and you're going to get a coalescing of these technologies into a smaller footprint, and then they become more personal, and you can start running AI models.
Yeah,
on your
I
phone.
was thinking exactly like the cell phone. You'll have an AI model just on your phone, and anyone can use it effectively. So now
Well, it's a natural evolution.
Very natural evolution. And then now putting a security lens on that, how do you see AI in the security landscape, and how it has impacted or evolved within the security landscape?
So that's an interesting one, because AI, in the security space, you've got a lot of data flowing around.
Yeah.
Right? People are using computer systems, people are interacting with them, they're producing events, whether those are good events or bad events, you have to determine after the fact, right? And you have to be able to track what people are doing, how data is being transferred, moved around. So AI can, to a certain extent, assist in that analysis. So it can do a certain amount of cleaning up of those data sets and showing you events and activities that are exceptional. But I think the biggest win that you're going to get with AI in security is you've got your own private dashhound dog or whatever that can go, you can instruct it to dive into the data and find things of particular interest or form to you that would have taken, say, hours beforehand, where you were handcrafting queries into multiple disparate SIEM systems and different services. Again, you can take the agent approach, you can make a large language model that is smart enough to be able to interact with loads of disparate sources of data, and then actually give you a result which you can then act on at a fraction of the time you would have been able to do it manually, right? But of course, the other flip side is it's not just the good guys who have access to these large language models. The bad guys have access to them well. So you're seeing all these sort of weird and wacky phishing things going on, people's faces being replaced. And, you're doing interviews now for job recruitment, and they're having to say, okay, can you put something in front of your face
just to make sure you're not a
really who you are. Right, so that is the downside of this, and you're always going to get this. It's the same with any technology. You know, a knife can be used to cut up bread, or it can be used to stab someone. So
Yeah, exactly.
you've got the same problem, and it will evolve over time. We're going to get better at making use of AI models and techniques in the security space. It's just early days at the moment, so you can see everybody's ramping up and putting AI on everything,
Yeah.
which is, you know, what happens. You know, a few years ago it was what was it, blockchain.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
AI is coming and being added onto everything, sort of
Every
sprinkled on,
every
the magic
tagline.
ingredient.
Exactly.
So we've got that coming through. You're going to go through a progressive round of refinement of where AI is actually really useful to you and how it actually gives good benefit. But you know, you've got to play it by ear. The whole space is evolving rapidly,
Yeah.
right? How things were last week, the week before that, etc., is different to what it is now.
Yeah.
Right? Especially in the whole agent space. I'm going to keep digging on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agents give you the ability to compose functionality into a model, unlike the mechanism you had before. So you can start including data sets and services into the model that suddenly give it this additional capabilities that you never had before.
Yep. Yep.
And that's a real driver for change, I think, going forward. Not just in the security space, but just in
Across
general
the board,
usage
yeah.
of
Yeah.
AI, because it becomes a more immediate, integrated solution for you going forwards. It's not just something that you talk to and then you have to take the results from it and then feed it into some other system and manipulate the data, etc. You've still got the human very much in the loop. Once you start getting more agent based, that becomes behind the scenes. It just goes off and does its thing and then comes back to you. And that's going to be a dramatic shift. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you've already started touching on what we're going to talk about next is security operations. So you talked about how do you think that organizations can currently right now actually implement AI within security operations, and what is also the things that perhaps we're just not quite ready to just let the AI work on its own.
Yeah, you're going to have a combination of technologies. So there's a lot of statistical analysis and data cleaning and data merging that goes on now using lots of very complicated pipeline scripts. Right? You know, if you've ever been involved in a SOC or a SIEM type operation, it's all about getting the data in and cleaning it
Yeah.
so that you can then work out what the different dimensions are that cut across. Right, so it could be time, it could be space, it could be a location, it could be an IP address, it could be a user doing something at a certain time, which is perfectly fine when they're in Australia, but then doing that at that time when they're somewhere else, like in Asia, it could be a big problem, right?
Exactly.
So you've always got to have this cleaning up of the data that comes through, and that will be, at the moment, it's a highly manual process. You can quite likely use AI to help you in doing that sort of analysis and writing the code that goes into your pipelines.
Yep.
But then the next level is going to be that you can actually use AI to extract more hidden context out of those actions and events, right, that people would not necessarily think of. So it gives you the benefit of, if you've got a model trained up to do this analysis, it will automatically think about all the different dimensions of concern, of all the different dimensions of data that you could have against all these events and make sure they're always present,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of work that's currently being manually done to set up all this cleaning of data can go more automated in the future. There'll always be some element of manual tidying up going on because it might not be within the scope of the AI model, but more of it will shift to an AI-based analysis. Then on the flip side, you're going to have what I call watches in the water. So borrowing from Lord of the Rings, it's basically they go looking at everything that's going on in your system, making sure that the operational behavior is normal. And as soon as it sees anything that looks abnormal, it's going to immediately pipe up that there's a problem here, which might lead to a manual notification, or it might lead to an automated response. So, for instance, you've got someone trying to do a DDoS attack against a particular service that's running in your systems. It might recognize that and go, okay, well, just block that IP. Done. And then it sends out notification. Right? Might be more subtle than that. It might recognize a certain pattern of usage by a user who's normally, a pretty regular person, 9 to 5 in how they access that service,
Mm-hmm.
and then they suddenly start trying to access it at 3 a.m. in the morning. Hello, right? all that sort of analysis. I mean, it's pretty simplistic, but you can do more complicated types of analysis
Yeah.
going forwards, and AI will help in pulling out those patterns of usage, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, it's always important to make sure that we're not having to deal with a whole bunch. I mean, you have to deal with a whole bunch of false positive, right? So, because the problem is that type of approach from a machine learning standpoint, which I've been exposed to. You always have to make sure that there's a fine line, like a good split between your false positive and like your actual
The signal to noise ratio.
Yeah.
So but I guess, like, with the way things are, because if you have to combine some of the machine learning research and how you tackle these type of problems versus combining that with the current advancement of AI, you could potentially get.
So the other thing people don't tend to think about is we have all these large language models and AIs that are available to apply to this data.
Yeah.
Well, people tend to forget a lot of this data is just pulled straight from people using the internet, right? So you look at an access log and it's got all the information about what the
Yep.
browser agents are, what the parameters are, what's been posted, what's been put, what's been etc. If you feed that straight into a large language model or access, then you've got the possibility that language model can be subverted, right? by the data that's been fed into it. So you've got to do additional things in your models to make sure that the data they're processing is sufficiently sanitized and cleaned
Yep.
before you start processing it to find more hidden patterns in usage, right? And that's the other side of the coin, right?
Yeah. Speaking of that data set, there's actually on Hugging Face there's a data set called Fine Web, and basically it's a massive repository of data collected from the web that are actually being used to train or fine tune large language models. So I'm pretty sure if you look into that. We'll put I'll post a link in the show notes on the episode on YouTube. But it's called Fine Web. Yeah, so that's
So you've got the situation now that people can inject prompts into videos and audio and images and all these sort of things. So your ability to protect a model against being unduly influenced by data that's come from the internet is a hard thing to solve.
Yeah.
You've got this spectrum, right, of where AI is safe to be used.
Yeah.
And there's a certain gap between it and the internet, right? And you want to have if you keep moving towards the internet, that you've got better and better controls to protect it against undue influence, right?
Yeah.
So in your experience, do you have any frameworks that you would recommend for securing AI? And obviously this is both training data and the models themselves.
I don't look at it that way. The way the technology is evolving and the way AI is getting plugged into everything in a security context, you can't really pick a framework because it depends on your specific usage case.
Yeah.
Right? So it depends upon the degree of sensitivity or confidentiality of the data that you've got, what regulatory domain you're under, how many people you've got in the business, whether you need to have a separation of concerns between all these people and all the workflows and the processes and everything else that's going on there. But you've got technologies like Sentinel, etc., and various other people who are working very hard on making sure that AI is something that can actually be leveraged in the SOC sense, right? And also around data protection and access of data. That's an interesting one because everybody wants to have access to data to process it and get valuable outcomes out of it. But again, the flip side is you've got to have the right controls around who's accessing the data, where that data is flowing, what the data life cycle is, and what do you do when that data is no longer required.
Yeah.
right? So I tend to look at AI from that sort of perspective as very much just another computing system. Yes, it's more capable, it's more powerful, but it is a system that you have to have the right controls around, no matter what. It just happens to be this wonderful thing called AI, right?
Yeah. So in your view,
And
do you think the protections need to differ from, traditional data security approaches, or we just use the same approaches and principles for AI?
okay, so the baseline is the same, but the trouble is with AI, especially with agents coming into it now, is it has its own agency to manipulate and process data. And we're seeing examples of, I think it was a paper a few months back, where they were able to try to convince the AI to escape out of its box.
Yes.
Right. So it's not as if you've got an old-fashioned computer system and it's like it's something running on this and it doesn't go anywhere and it'll always do the same thing it's ever done. The more internal context it has and the longer it keeps that context, the more opportunity it is for it to be used in a way that you weren't intending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's got more internal agency, it's more aware of what it's doing, and again, depending on the data you're processing through it, you could have injection attacks occurring through different domains, whether there be an image domain, whether it be a time domain, be an audio domain, etc. So the more you empower the AI, the more you need to be thinking about the security controls around what that actually has access to over time.
Yeah.
So does that mean essentially having potentially from a security standpoint, like a list of different actions that can be taken by these, AI agents, for instance, and be able to tie the knots on each of them, or like what will be?
Yeah, we've discussed this before. The trouble is that when you're running an AI, it's acting on your behalf.
Yeah,
Therefore, it should only have the permissions and access that you have, and nothing beyond that.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
Right. So that's the main control you've got over that. So you need to have frameworks that I think what Google are doing support this as well, where they pass through your permission structure and what your credentials are and what you're allowed to access, and that gets bolted onto the agents, so they can only interact with what you would have been able to interact with.
yeah, yeah,
So
Right.
effectively,
So
yeah. So effectively, you have an AI assistant or teammate,
Yeah.
so to speak, and you as the human are accountable for all the actions the AI takes.
yeah. Well, it's not accountable. You're scoping it. Right. So if you were, say, somebody in accounts who's looking after, say, a set of customer accounts, right, you'd only be able to access those customer accounts via
Yeah.
the AI system. You wouldn't be able to look at somebody else's accounts. Right. And there's a lot of subtlety in this as well. So, I mean, going back years, I've seen systems where people have put in controls around what you can access, and then let services like what you can search still search across everything.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So you can have like a whole set of I don't know, policies within your business, and you can go and search across the whole lot, and you can see what policies you've got. But then if you try to click into them, it then denies
You
you because
can't
you don't have the
access it,
rights to do
yeah.
that. But you've seen what the number of policies are, which can be sensitive in its own right.
Yeah. And so when it comes to threat actors, with your background in algorithmic optimization and risk assessments, how
Yeah.
do you think that threat actors will be able to weaponize AI? And what are some of the defensive strategies that organizations can consider, particularly in the APAC region?
Yeah, so the situation you've got here is that all the bad actors have access to all the tooling that we have in AI at the moment, and they're going after getting the best bang for buck in terms of what they're doing. So you've
Yeah.
got phishing attacks, etc., where they're a lot more personalized, they're a lot more contextual to a particular business or an individual, because obviously you can go scraping information off various job sites, etc., that exist on the internet, and you can learn out what the structure of an organization is,
Yeah.
who reports to whom, and then you can write much more tailored phishing attacks against businesses, which is one area. And there's also phishing attacks occurring through social media now, right? So they're working out that you work at X. This is your WhatsApp account identification, therefore we'll ping you by WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And they'll try and avoid going through email, which is usually quite well locked down. And that is then leading to opportunities for more nuanced ransomware installations. Right? So we're talking about having sort of like fly-by-wire ransomware, which is sort of as it gets installed, and then the AI is driving it remotely to make sure that the ransomware spreads throughout the network as best as possible. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an evolving space. And there are ways that you can defend against this. You can do separations of concerns. You can keep systems apart that should be apart. You can put in proper firewall controls. You can restrict your data flow. You can do poisoning of the well, and you can do canaries in your data sets. So poisoning of the well is where they think they're attacking something, but it actually changes its behavior on the fly. Right, so they think they're attacking X server, and it turns out to change its signature of how it does things, which confuses whoever's attacking, because they can't treat it in a traditional way.
Yeah.
And then they put in the canary data into your data set, so you can have a canary piece of data, which is data that should never ever be accessed by anything. And if you see that going through your firewall, that's an indication that some bad things really happened, and you can lock that communication down immediately, right? There's other things you can do, like you can do training, improving the training of your staff, making them more aware of these phishing attacks. And at the end of the day, the human is usually the weakest link.
Seems like it's getting harder for the everyday users, like you mentioned, from a phishing perspective. In the past, I think organizations have always struggled where you even have admins who fall for phishing attacks. And so if they're becoming more and more sophisticated, it means that more and more people will likely fall for these phishing attacks. And so we have to become more stringent with the training and retraining.
Well, it's training and around permission control. So you quite often find that admins will have long-lived access into multiple systems at once, which is kind of like nuts. You want to have fine-grained access control that makes use of systems like PIM, etc. So it's just in time permission to access and use the system that's granted by a third party, that's not influenced by the phishing attack.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is all additional overheads that businesses have to incur to fight this off. But there's a certain way you need to do this to make sure that you keep things secure.
Yeah, so I guess the identity and access management space needs to mature for this in particular.
Well, just me not being a security person, would there be a need to have also identity access management at an agent level? Is that something that could ever?
Yeah. So you're passing through the identity of the user. Yeah.
No, but then what I'm saying is not. So imagine a situation where those agent becomes autonomous to the point where they don't necessarily need to, operate by taking people's instructions and then trying to figure out and get the answer. They're actually autonomous in the sense that they can also. So say for instance, yes, you have a digital brain or you have like an agent that essentially just there to monitor what's happening, in terms of, activities. May say for instance in a factory, for instance, and you have an agent that is just there to like look at the feed, the video feeds, and be able to provide some signals in terms of what's happening in there. So that agent, for instance, could potentially be able to, like, based on the information that it sees from the screen, will be able to say, contact this X person because something is happening in this area, for instance.
Yeah,
so there you have like an autonomous agent, which is not necessarily taking instructions from someone. So it's not like you're going to pass on that, permissions from the user to the agent. The agent is actually now its own entity, with a defined set of activity and task So now what I'm asking is that same concept will be applied to those agents, those autonomous agents.
Yeah. So they will have an identity. There'll be like a service account, so it's a machine account, and they will act in that way with the permissions that are given in that context. Right? That's how you do it. So basically, it's equivalent to, say, a human backed account. It just happens to be a machine that's running it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And then looking at cloud and AI infrastructure within security, obviously you had experience designing large-scale multi-region cloud systems. What would you say are some of the unique security architectures you would recommend specifically for AI workloads?
Ooh. I would say you need to look at the sensitivity of the data that you're processing through it, and actually go with providers who have the right certifications and the right background to actually operate in those environments with that sensitivity of that data. So we're looking at the likes of, you're looking at the likes of Microsoft, you're looking at the likes of Google, etc. So, if you've got highly sensitive data that you want to process, you want to make sure that that data is put through AI infrastructure that has been designed with a large governance aspect to it, right? You can get AI systems that have got degrees of approvals that allow them for usage with sensitive data, even government level data. And you need to talk with your vendor and work out how much that's going to cost and what the effort is in doing that, right? It might get to a situation where certain cases need that you have to run your model in isolation under your own specific control, but that's not going to be the general case for most people, because most people will be using an individual business case with data that has sort of low to medium sensitivity, I would say. Right? Again, it depends on your particular case.
Yeah. Okay.
So things I look for is like the businesses of ISO 27001 certification, NIST, etc. Also, I would be looking at how they manage pushing the data into the production environment, and how they have correct separations between their production environment and non-production environment. Do they do logging of admins accessing into the production environment? Or there's the sort of smells I look for that indicate whether someone's actually taking their security seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like a reliance on the main, like you said, Microsoft, AWS, Google, reliance on those cloud service providers to ensure that they have those controls, those foundational basic controls.
And if you've got a really weird, strange sort of like military or really secret source case, you might not be comfortable running it in those environments, and it's you'd have to run locally. But then if you're running it locally, you've then got to carry the can of putting all the security controls around it. So.
Yeah, and how do you think? Well, obviously, then that means that I guess most government organizations that have that high level security requirement, do you think that they are potentially, leveraging AI to the most that we can at the moment, given what you've mentioned with the complexity of security controls required?
They're probably exploring it, but again, they are bound by a lot of regulations in how they use data on a day-to-day basis. So there needs to be a process of them actually going through and cleaning up data in a form that they can put that into AI systems that are at the right security level. You just can't go taking a data dump of taxpayers, etc., and stick it straight into any old AI system and expect to have a good outcome, right? You've got to have the right security controls in place. You've got to have the right monitoring, and you've got to have the right permissioning structures around these things. Because at the end of the day, if you're dealing with PII, there's a really big danger that if an AI system is subverted, that PII can escape. And that's a nightmare scenario for whoever's impacted and for whatever business was holding on to that PII, right?
Yeah, exactly. And once it's out, it's in the wild west of the web.
Yeah.
It's out. You can't put it back in the box. So maybe we
Oh
want
yeah,
to.
yeah. I mean, I'm actually gobsmacked at the number of breaches that are still going on large scales.
Yeah.
Right? Because securing data in databases and actually stopping people getting away with extracting large data sets is not that hard. Right? You just need to have the presence of mind to think about that as a risk that's coming, that your system is facing, and then put in a few simple controls that actually stop that activity being able to complete.
Yeah.
They may get away with like 1% of your data, but they won't get away with the other 99% because
Yes.
you've recognized that they're trying to do this extraction of data out of there, and they've maybe hit a canary data set, and that's gone, no, stop.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
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 And obviously, you authored a book, Personal Information Security and Systems Architecture. So, how do you envision secure system design evolving over the next few years? Obviously, as AI becomes more prevalent.
Yeah, so AI gives us the opportunity to properly classify data and actually index it in the way it should be indexed going forward. Right? So businesses tend to have, some are good at this, some are bad at this, actually doing the classification of the
Yeah.
data and working out what's sensitive data,
Yeah.
what's not, etc. AI will help raise the bar on that. So you can do the analysis on the data and go, okay, yes, this is actually really significant. We need to up the labeling and the controls we've got around these particular data sets. It'll also help monitoring of the flows of data through
Yes,
the
the
systems
data
that
flows.
we've
Yeah,
got,
exactly.
so that you can actually restrict it better, and you can actually start, doing a more, why did you want access to this data? Can you please explain?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're starting to see this come through with the PIM workflows and controls that now exist in entities like Entra ID, where they will do an analysis of your access behavior into different systems, and then if you're the black sheep of the family, as it were, it will point that out. So you can do that sort of degree of analysis that's coming through. What else is there? No, I think that mine's that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. And obviously, we can't escape the fact that we have organizations now have a lot of third parties collaborating or working with them. So, from your perspective, how do you think the due diligence process needs to actually evolve to then match what we're dealing with now with vendors having implemented their own AI capabilities within their own products that then plug into our environment? What are the specific questions that we need to be asking and checks that we need to be making?
Yeah, it's turning into a bit of AI models all the way down at the moment with third-party vendors. It's like you integrate with one, and there's another one, and they're using an AI model, and of course you've got the AI
Yeah.
marketing thing of sticking AI into literally everything. So what you need to do, first of all, determine is are they actually using AI, right? So they're not just
Adding it to
sticking a
market,
label on
yeah,
something
for
which is
marketing.
not AI, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first determination, is actually making sure that they're actually looking to use a proper AI system and not just something that's been branded to be AI. I mean, they might be innocent to the fact they might be using a third party that says they're AI and it turns out not to be, right? So that could possibly be a scenario. Then they need to actually tell you about what the data flow is and the data life cycle. Right, so where is your data going? How is it interacting with that model? What controls are in place to make sure that only the particular bits of data that you want go into that AI model and are accessed and used by that AI model?
Yeah.
Right? And then where is the AI model running? It may be that you've got a restriction, a geo restriction on where your data exists,
Yeah.
and it seems to be scribbling its way to the US for some unknown reason, right? That can be a problem. And then you've got to then ask, what additional usage is being made of that data. So you have the situation on ChatGPT where they were literally recording everything and saying, "Hey, yeah, we want to train all of this data that's coming through here," and then You have to go screwing into the system and find out what magic switch to go and turn off the training to make sure that
Yeah.
that doesn't happen, right? So there's a certain degree of transparency that needs to exist with the various AI providers. So they actually say, okay, we're going to be doing this in this context, in this way, and we're going to stick to that going forwards. There's nothing worse than when you're dealing with a third party and they change their terms of service and somehow this clause have got pushed in that says, hey, we'll use your data for AI
For
training.
training, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So there needs to be a sort of a fessing up and sort of like, okay, fine. If you said that you're not going to use it for training, you will never use it for training. Right? And that needs to be enforced.
Yeah.
And I think there's a gap there in the regulatory mechanisms that exist, GDPR, etc. That if you've said that you're not going to be using something for it, you'll never use it for that going forwards. Right? You won't just change the game halfway through, 2 years into the contract or whatever, and they change the T's and C's and they start trading off it.
Because effectively, I suppose they're leaving the organization in a very tricky position where they've been using the service or tool for 2 years, and then they're told terms of conditions are going to change, or terms of use are going to change, and so they now have to think, do we terminate the use? And then the business has to make that decision. Yeah. You touched a little bit on what I think would be fourth parties. So who would then be responsible to ensure that the fourth parties are actually, following your requirements?
This touches on things like APRA and various sort of regulations that exist in Australia, and also I think there's similar sort of things in the US, etc., where you have to basically follow the yellow brick road, work through all the different vendors to get to a point where you can actually say, okay, I know what the coverage is of the usage of this data, and where it's going and where it's been put at rest and what its life cycle is. And that's a lot of work. There's no getting away from that. But hopefully, again, if you look on the flip side, maybe AI can help with that and
Make
help
it
with the
easier.
discovery for you.
Yeah.
So you can use the tooling on the discovery side to help you find out where that data is going, and actually, give yourself a report that says, okay, I'm using vendor X. They're actually talking to vendor A, B, C, and D also, and D wants to train off that data. Right, so you can do that sort of analysis. And there's quite a lot of businesses now are putting up information about how they're using AI on their websites. So if you've got a smart enough agent, you can do some of that discovery for you, but again, you've got to back that up by actually confirming that what they said on the website is what actually happens in reality.
Exactly. And I think that's where the AI governance comes in within organizations, having that function, or if you're getting external support on that, it becomes really important. So we touched on the regulatory environment, and so Australia's obviously got a few things coming out now. We've got the voluntary AI safety standard. How do you think organizations can navigate these regulations well from a compliance and security perspective across their AI implications,
Well, I think things like
implementations?
the the voluntary AI safety standard, it's a good start. So it's like 10 guardrails of how you should be actually approaching using AI in your business and what you need to look for. But again, you've got to look at the particular usage case that you've got and what your risks are and what your appetite is for those risks. Right? And that's something that only each business can decide in each case. It can't just pick up a list of things that it would say and say, okay, I need, I'm looking at this, I do these 10 things and that's good enough. No. Use that as a starting point and then go on beyond that and start doing the what if type analysis on how that AI will be used going forwards and where the data is flowing and how it's being used. Right?
Yeah.
So the other thing is you need to start thinking a bit about AI systems as if they're like a form of digital employee, right? Because at the end of the day, we're going to have a situation where AI systems will have a lot of agency, a lot of ability to interact with data sets and other systems to the same degree that a regular employee does now. Everybody does everything through their laptop. Right? Nowadays, you go into work unless you're in some job shifting boxes around. You're sitting in an office, you're interacting with a computer, and you're manipulating ones and zeros. That's exactly the same thing an AI system can do. right? So you need to be looking at that from the same sort of level of risk and how you actually engage with that going forwards, right? So there's going to be a maturing of the regulatory framework to recognize the capabilities that AI will have going forwards, right? And they're almost equivalent to an employee in their agency going forwards, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think when it comes to, obviously, you mentioned the business risk, that means that executives, board members need to understand AI. Do you think we're at the stage where we were, years ago with security, where the messaging was the board, the executives need to understand AI? Is that where we're at now?
I think they need to have a better awareness of what AI is capable of and what the risks are that come with each of those capabilities. Because at the end of the day, when you're at board level, you're looking at opportunities for the business, and you're also looking at what the costs or downsides might be from going in one direction compared to another. Right?
Yeah.
You're taking a long view into how things are changing and where you should position yourselves to benefit from those changes going forwards. Not all changes are good. Right?
Yeah.
So you've got to deal with that risk that comes in there. So it's about having sufficient awareness at the board level to go, okay, this looks good. This is the way we can go. What can we do to make sure that any risks that could eventuate around that are properly dealt with? Right? That might not be a board level function. That might be something that occurs underneath it or to the side, but you still have to have those conversations.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this is a technology system. It's like, if you're setting up a new team within your business to, do some advanced data processing. Well, there's got to have procedures and processes around how you do that. The same sort of thing needs to happen when you're actually using AI systems, and especially when you're doing the bleeding edge type of solutions that are coming through now. We've got a rate of change with AI, which is just absolutely astonishing. There's something new coming out literally every week.
Literally every week.
It's hard for businesses to deal with that rate of change and actually properly account for risks that will be generated from that, because literally all the decision sands are shifting all the time, right? And they don't want to miss out.
Yeah, exactly.
Because at the end of the day, they're all there to protect their business, the revenue, the
grow
customers,
the business. Yeah.
their customers as well. So and there's a reputational risk. I remember a couple of years ago, when security, not even like a couple of years ago, I think like late 2010s, when security became more of like it has to become a conversation in the boardroom, but it feels like AI is kind of like accelerating that to become even, not just like a topic, one of the topic to discuss, but top priority in general for most businesses.
And the thing with AI, it's very approachable. Right, so whereas security is seen as a very complicated discipline that you need a CISSP on various to get anywhere in it, you can just open up a browser, go and talk to like ChatGPT and start playing with it, which yes is very advantageous, but also it hides the complexity and the problems that might come from that. Right?
Yeah.
It's like having a very capable toy that can explode on you at any minute.
Exactly. You don't know what it can and cannot do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about you've got to educate people that this exciting, cuddly new technology does have downsides.
Yeah.
Right?
So do you think it's because AI it's almost like you say, it's it's a toy that everyone has access to. It made it like a double-edged sword type of situation where it gives you all the benefits that you could be exposed to, but on the flip side, it presents so much risk, and even and when I say so much risk, there's probably other element that we haven't even explored yet, and it all comes from how clever and how creative those bad actors are in creating those situations so that now we're starting to understand, the whole list of risk that an organization or even individuals can be exposed to by just using AI.
Yeah, so it's funny to me. It's like in computer science and security, there's SQL injections, right? So this is where you've got a piece of SQL and you're doing your code into your database, and then you pull in a data field by just say concatenating it on the end, right?
Yeah.
And you got the old cartoon of Johnny drop tables, right? That sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So what I find interesting in AI now is you've got like the system prompts and user prompts, etc. They all feed in through the same stream, right, into the various large language models. Now, if it been me, anything to do with system prompts would go a different way. So there's no way you could inject a system prompt significant action into what the user is putting into the model. But we haven't got that, right? We haven't got that separation of distance between what's system level instruction into a model and what's user level instruction into a model. There's this soft boundary which people try to put filters on and various other controls around, but then we keep seeing more and more inventive ways of convincing a model to do and change its behavior, right? I mean, injecting things by images, injecting things by different encodings, and then even the initial letters of a word. And so you got like a phrase and say, please do something or whatever. So the initial letters. So it's one of these things that keep prompt manipulation is like a game at the moment, right? Everybody's trying to do different ways of injecting things into models to get them to do what they shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Whereas if someone had been involved, so we say with a security background at the beginning, they would have gone, no. Stuff to do with system goes this way, stuff to do with users goes that way, and the two never meet.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we're having to deal with a consequence of a bad decision ages ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I was, as you were talking, I was looking at the OWASP. You said it.
Yeah.
Wasp.
OWASP top 10 LLM top 10 for LLM applications. So you have prompt injection is the first one, insecure output handling, training data poisoning, model denial of service, supply chain vulnerabilities, sensitive information disclosure, insecure plugin design, excessive agency, over reliance, and then model theft. So
Yes, I think I've covered all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I was about to say we actually covered all of that, really.
yes,
Yeah.
I mean, like
But
the
it's
one
interesting.
the
I mean,
sorry, the one aspect maybe that you can expand a bit on is I'm actually quite curious about that model theft, which is quite an interesting one.
yeah, so that's where a model is given access to its own weights. And then you can then have some mechanism by which you can then convince the model to escape out of where it's running. Now, it may be that you're doing it directly by the model, or you're actually attacking the model framework. So you find a way of doing some probably SQL injection attack or equivalent attack against the framework itself, not necessarily against the model, and then that gives you the mechanism to go and grab all the weights and run off with the model.
Yep.
So it's actually a more an infrastructure level sort of attack, I would think, rather than actually. It's very rare that a model will be given access to change its own weights. Right, that's sort of like very exceptional.
Yeah, that's pretty scary because if you get access to, it's like getting access to proprietary information, right? So a model is just an asset to a business. So if that model, which is probably going to be like the central point for the business operation to happen, and if that model is compromised, then
That's
it's done.
game over.
Yeah,
right?
the IP's out.
If you spend a lot of effort training up that model to make your business run really efficiently, then the problem is it means that somebody who gets hold of that model and then sets up their own business somewhere else,
Just replicate it,
some offshore locale, if I name it, but they'll go and set up in that place. You can't compete. your ability to compete has been utterly destroyed.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
unique selling proposition has been destroyed.
Yeah. So I'm assuming then there are probably threat actors out there who are in the business of trying to do this because it's quite a lucrative opportunity.
Oh yeah, for certain, for certain. The more capability you add into an AI model within your business, the more it is a target, because it's like a Pandora's chest, right? You get into that, you get into everything that it's connected to if you succeed, right? So normally most businesses usually have an isolation between different parts of the business, be it finance, be it marketing, be it the engineering, etc., DevOps, etc. There'll be a certain degree of isolation. But if you've
Yeah.
got something sitting across the top that is giving you access into all of these different things, even
Everything.
though it may
Yeah.
be adopting an agent-based approach and following the permissions in each case, if someone gets into that thing, pops the hood underneath, and
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Like you mentioned previously, we had our business silos, and now those silos are
yeah.
being broken from a technology perspective.
So at the moment, we've got a setup where there's lots of big training occurring in co-location facilities, and it's costing billions of dollars to do these things. Then you've got the actual running of the models, which is costing thousands of dollars
inference.
of hardware to get the thing actually to run properly.
Yep.
There's changes coming through in the actual fabrication of the chips, which will result either in a 100 times speed up because you actually separated the data plane connection from the power plane connection. At the moment, everything is all on the top of the chip. So your connectivity is taking twice as long, which means you've got twice as much resistance, which means you've got 4 times as much heat, right? But if you separate out the data plane from the power plane, there's a lot less distance because you're not competing with each other. So your power factor is dramatically improved, right? Which means your ability to crank up the clock rate goes up, which means you can do potentially up to 100 times throughput from that. Then there's other technologies coming through, which a few companies are working on, where at the root of all neural networks is matrix multiplications. Right, so you've got rows, columns, multiply them together, then sum up the results, and then you sum up the result together, and then you work out what the action is going to be coming from that particular neural network. There's actually technologies coming through which, instead of doing that in the digital domain, do that in like the analog voltage / capacitance domain. So you just set all the weights, run your voltage through, you get the results on the other end, and boom, you're done. So rather than it taking 200, 300 times, it's unit time. And it's unit time by independently of how big the matrix is. So that's going to drastically change things. That's like getting on for 1,000 times plus speed up in the processing, and 1,000 times reduction potentially in the actual energy consumed. Yep, you're going to have AI models running locally on your phone at some point.
Yeah, and I believe that's kind of
Not
follows
small
like
models, quite large models.
Yeah, and I believe that follows that kind of like what's been happening in history, right? So back in the days,
The
I was mainframes,
Yeah.
then you got the PC, then now we have massive GPUs running to serve those models. In the future, it will be just like in a tiny little object for you to get all the compute that you need, right?
It's a fascinating space because the AI, the chip manufacturers are literally getting down to a smallness of feature that's getting down to like individual atoms.
Yeah.
They can't go any smaller than that, so they're doing all sorts of tricks of going vertically and horizontally and changing their dynamics on how to put the gates together, etc., and then doing quantum tunneling in gates.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, where does quantum computing come into all of this?
That's very interesting because quantum computing has been an interesting one because everybody keeps playing with it and everybody keeps experimenting with it, but it's got enormous barriers to entry.
Yeah.
Right, so you need to have a large setup, a custom setup that's going down to almost near zero temperature Kelvin or whatever, and then you've got all your qubits or whatever running in there, and you're processing it, and you're getting the results out of it. I don't know how that's going to interplay with AI. I suspect there's a nice, in the future, interaction between those two technologies, because quantum gives you the ability to solve wicked set problems in unit
Yeah.
time, right? So we're talking about the ability to break basic cryptography and other find other solutions to things. So many years ago, I was doing a CSIP training course. I got talking to the guy who was running it. We got chatting about quantum, and the weird thing with quantum is it will give you more than you want back. So if you're like factorizing primes, it will tell you the prime, and it will tell you like two or three others at the same time.
Wow.
So there's this weird, strange behavior going on
Yeah.
with your running of the algorithm and
Yeah.
the context in which you're running it, and you'll get other side effects occurring. It's like, whoa. So it's a strange space, but I can see it being useful going forwards, right?
So
And I just wanted to ask, in the context of security now, we always hear about how threat actors, they get a hold of encrypted data, and they're holding onto this data up until the point where they can use quantum computing to decrypt it. So what can we do today that will sort of deal with that future problem that we can see is coming?
Well, there's one thing they forget, and that's the usefulness of data degrades over time. Right, so something 50 years ago is not equally as valuable in the data sense as something that's last week.
that's true. Yeah.
Right? People move around, people change their names, they change their relationships, they change their bank accounts.
Yeah.
You know, they change all sorts of stuff all the time. It's what life is. It's change. So, if you're holding on to data that's, getting on to 10, 20, 30 years old and waiting for, quantum computing to crack it all open, you suddenly think you want a pot of gold, most of it will be tin because it
Yeah.
will no longer accurate.
Yeah. But what about
Right?
in the context, like from a personal information perspective, you have a tax file number or whatever, you carry it throughout your whole life.
Yeah.
What about those type of bits of data?
Well, that's going to be a big problem. But you've got various governments, etc., moving to more digital-based IDs, which are more, longer length keying, etc., and more special case keying as well. So the same key is not reused all the time. You just generate a new one that happens to, in their systems, point to the same record. So you're going to have a situation where, you can break into stuff, but it's not going to be that useful. It's not going to help you that much. So to a certain degree, I look at this whole quantum cryptography thing and the fact that you're breaking into stuff. Yes, it could be used against HTTPS sessions and TLS, etc., those sort of sessions. Fine, you might get information out of that, but again, there's I follow a professor on LinkedIn. There's new technologies coming through which are, quantum hardened. So that's not going to be a problem going forwards. It's going to be, the encryption, decryption algorithms are expressed in such a way that you can't map them usefully into a quantum realm, right? So, the technology moves forwards. Many years ago, Caesar cipher was perfectly acceptable, right? Now it's not. Right? So things just keep evolving,
Keep moving
and improving,
forward.
right? In response to the threats.
So yeah, I think you've said quite a lot, and it's quite obvious now to everyone who's going to be watching this podcast that you are a person who's been around and still keeping up with what's happening, very much hands-on. So what would you say, what would be your best advice that you can give to the security folks out there that still think that AI, should be, will be dealt with at some point, and they're not looking at it right now? Like, what would be the best advice you could give them in terms of keeping up with the news the same way you're doing, or essentially just like, finding ways to start thinking about, how they can integrate AI into, the type of risk or the type of operation that they're dealing with, so that it support the business that they're working for or their own business.
Well, as I mentioned before, AI has got a low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have to be an AI expert in order to start playing with it and seeing what you can do with it. There's a lot of vendors out there in the security space who are layering in AI in various places. So, I would suggest they just go and try it out. Get themselves a ChatGPT login or access to some various models or Llama, etc., and just try it out. Get a basic understanding of how the thing puts together, what its usage cases are, right? When you can actually apply it, and just learn up a little bit. It's not, we're not using AI at the level where you're actually doing training of the models, etc. Right? We're not, most security people would not be in that sort of space of actually doing the detailed training of models. They're actually doing a parameterization setup of those models to deal with certain situations. And it's a lot less scary than doing training of models, right? So I would not be shying away from exploring AI in security, right? Especially with the fact that it's now moving, the AI space is moving to be more business and also personally integrated into people's lives. You're going to have a hard job avoiding it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's going to be there. You've got to learn about how to use it. You've got to learn what the pros and cons are. It's a tool set that is maturing rapidly, and its ability, especially with the likes of agents, is going to be quite powerful to all sorts of different people, right?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting to see what's been happening. Like, for instance, I was watching the news, or actually, I think you might have sent that to me this week about the Google and releasing their agent, A to A, which is agent to agent protocol, and it seems like I've seen that happening with Salesforce and what they call Agent Force. So it seems like a lot of these like organizations are starting to get into a space where you now have like agent as a service type of like
So
tools.
you've got the agent space stuff. So it's a natural evolution. So it's not, mobile phones didn't really take off till they had App Store. So you could log in and you can put your own apps into it and get it to work the way you wanted, right? Likewise, I think this is the same enabler for AI, in that you'll have a marketplace of agents that you can plug in and configure and use them how you wish. There may be a certain fee structure associated with some of those agents, which is perfectly fine. You've got a really highly capable agent that's helping you solve a critical problem. Putting a few dollars towards whoever's developed it is perfectly fine in my case, right? So I can see there being a whole market developing around very capable agents going forwards. I mean, although you might also get the same thing that you have in app stores that might have adverts all over them.
You get in an agent store. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and I mean that's very interesting. And now from those ones coming out of university, in terms of wanting to specialize in security, what do you think will be your recommendation in terms of like path that they should take to get to to become professional in this space, especially because everything is happening so fast? Is there a specific career path or a set of qualifications that they could get to become professionals
so in
in this
security,
space?
normally there's two paths. So there's the technical side. You're going off, you're doing stuff on computers, you're dealing with setting up technologies to be secure, and you're monitoring them and you're controlling them, and you're putting policies and procedures in place, and you're doing access control, right? All that sort of stuff. Then the other side is the regulatory compliance / policy side, right? So that's doing all the paperwork, following all the procedures, making sure that things get reviewed at the right frequency, that anything that's found to be wrong is actually dealt with in the right time frame, etc., etc. Right? So you got those two sides. Most degrees that do security will have different aspects in that. Will have particular units that you can take on that, and it's like find out what really interests you. You know, if you're from a security background, you know, if you're from a technical background, do some basic courses on security, because you're going to have to encounter it no matter what. If you're writing serious software,
That's
you
right.
have to write it to be secure.
Yeah.
So, you know, do security there, and then just look through and see what other units are available to you. All good computer science degrees or equivalent degrees will have different units on security that you can do, right? So whether it be cryptographics, whether it be algorithmic analysis, etc., permission control models, all that sort of stuff, right? Role-based access controls, attribute-based access controls, blah, blah, blah. All that sort of universe of security. You can go into that as far as you want. I would also suggest that you have some exposure to the other side of the fence. So you know what's going on the regulatory compliance side, policy side, because you will be encountering it, and there will be requirements for you to implement what's required here, or maybe consult into that to make sure that the particular policies or requirements that you've got actually are achievable in the technical space. There's nothing worse than having a grandiose set of policies that don't actually map down to your technology, because then you keep making bad assumptions about how something should be done, and that's just bad from a security point of view. You want a clean alignment between what you're doing on your policy and your requirements capture side, and that sort of side going down onto how you actually technically implement it. As regards certifications, again, they go down the sort of role that you might want to do. So you might want to be like a threat hunter. You go and you do all the red teaming and the blue teaming, etc., and you can get certifications down that path. If you want to do the more management / engagement sort of side, then there's things like CISSP, etc., you could go down. But there's lots of courses out there, and there's lots of certifications out there. So it's just a case of looking around and seeing what suits you at your particular stage. And you're going to have 30, potentially 40 years in that particular area. You might move, and quite possibly you can move around. Right? You might start off on the technical side, and then you move across onto the policy side. That's perfectly acceptable, and that's actually quite a good thing to do, because when you're looking at policies, you'll understand all the consequences of how you have to implement these things.
That's right.
Exactly.
Good
So
to know.
don't look at it as a very linear, straight path. You can move around.
Move
right?
around,
That's
yes.
actually quite good.
And as the landscape is evolving, you just give yourself that opportunity to evolve within it as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, I'm always on my LinkedIn, I'm always posting about things that are going on in the security, architecture, technology space, and those sort of things. So that people can feel free to perfectly follow me on there. And there's a lot of resources available online, like this podcast. There's other podcasts. There's other people blogging a lot about these different things. And I follow several YouTubers who do things in the AI space, and also do a whole lot of things in the technology space. So AI depends on technology. So understanding the technology helps you work out where things are going in the future, which puts me in a good position to then understand what the consequences of these things are over time, right?
That's true. And one thing that I also found quite interesting is getting to watch some of the conferences, because they usually post videos on YouTube. So I think the one that Vivian had mentioned to me last year was RSA. Was it the RSA conference? They have some interesting, especially I've watched a couple on AI and security, and I found it very fascinating. But I've already got a handful of things to worry about. Security, I'll probably make sure that I can understand, but not necessarily being like a hands-on. Like you mentioned,
And then
you still need to.
like NVIDIA are doing with virtual reality training of robot models. So rather than having to actually physically make a robot and train it in a physical environment, you create thousands of virtual robots and train them in a virtual environment. You got the video cards, use them. Right. So there's this sort of interesting mix you've got going on here. And then there's the whole robotics side of things and security that's coming through, which is going to be quite interesting. So that's the whole human actor level of interaction directly in the physical space.
In the physical
In the
space,
physical
exactly.
Yeah. No, interesting.
And there's a whole security concern area around that. You might have somebody who's, I don't know, elderly or slightly disabled or whatever, and they've got a robot in their house that helps them out or whatever, and then some bad actor comes along and just basically pulls the plug on this thing, and then it might end up killing this per person.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that sort of side of things you got to look at as well, right?
Yeah.
And I know countries like Japan are really far along in trying to do this, but I think what I saw from what the video were doing, it was like, wow, they're actually turning AI robotics into a commodity solution. And that's what you really need.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Great. Well, Keith, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I think our audience is really going to enjoy what we discussed. And we always say we always want to welcome our guests to come back on the podcast again, because there's always more to talk about. But thank you for today. Really enjoyed it.
I'll be love to come back at some point, because this is an amazing space.
Yeah.
I can see this evolving rapidly over the next 5 to 10 years as the technology base evolves.
Yeah.
It's going to become a lot more integrated into everybody's lives. So security is going to become more and more important.
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to also echo what Vivian said. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure. And I think, it's a small world. AI is, or technology, because I just don't want to always just making just all about AI. Technology in general is moving quite rapidly. You mentioned about the evolution of, the hardware, and how in the future it will make even, it will bring that power into people's pockets. I mean, in a way we're getting that, but it's through API calls. But in the future, it will actually be in your pocket. So
it'll be a lot more will be running locally. It's the way to go, because if you're running it locally, your ability to control it is that much greater.
It's that much greater.
Right?
That's right.
It's more immediate, and it's more embedded into your local environment. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, we are going to close up this episode. It's been an awesome pleasure for those who are watching us, the subscribers and all these people, and the greater What the Tech community. We are extremely grateful for the support. And if you ever need to have understand how this technology works, feel free to reach out. We are just one click away on LinkedIn, and just just reach out to us. That would be awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you. Right.